December 1940 for Western Front. Ardennes Forest was silent, but not peaceful. Snow fell thick and heavy, smothering roads, burying tanks, freezing men where they stood. The kind of cold that didn't just bite, it punished. Engines failed, weapons jammed, fingers blackened with frost. Even seasoned soldiers whispered that no army could move in weather like this, and yet, one man intended to do exactly that. While German forces launched their last great gamble, the Ardennes Offensive, later known as the Battle of the Bulge, the Allied High Command was reeling. The German attack had shattered American lines. Towns fell. Units were surrounded. The vital crossroads at Bastogne was encircled, trapping the 101st Airborne Division in a ring of steel. In Berlin, maps were being redrawn with cautious optimism. In the headquarters of the German High Command, officers believed, perhaps for the first time in years, that the war in the West might still be turned. They were wrong. The storm before the decision, General George S. Patton was not where the Germans expected him to be. His Third Army was positioned far to the south, engaged in operations in Lorraine. According to every rule of warfare, every logistical calculation, and every precedent in military history, Patton was out of position to respond to the Ardennes crisis. The Germans knew this. Their intelligence officers had studied American doctrine. Armies needed weeks, sometimes months, to reposition on a major front. Roads were frozen. Fuel was scarce. Visibility was near zero. Even reconnaissance aircraft were grounded by the blizzard. The German High Command concluded something simple and fatal. Patton could not reach Bastogne in time. At a meeting in Berlin, senior officers noted that the American Southern forces were neutralized by geography and weather. One officer reportedly said, "The American Third Army might as well be on another continent." That sentence would age badly. Patton's private Patton had been waiting for this moment. Days before the German offensive even began, he had sensed something coming. Call it instinct, call it experience, call it obsession. In late November, Patton had quietly asked his staff a strange question. If the Germans attacked through the Ardennes, how long would it take us to turn north and counterattack? His staff had been stunned. The question bordered on madness. Turning an entire army, hundreds of thousands of men, thousands of vehicles 90 degrees across frozen terrain in winter conditions was unheard of. Still, Patton demanded an answer. They worked in secret, while snow piled higher and German armor prepared in silence. Patton's planners drafted contingency orders. Routes were mapped. Supply chains were imagined. Timetables were sketched in pencil, knowing full well that most of it would be chaos once executed. When the German offensive exploded on December 16th, Patton did not panic. He smiled. "We attack in 48 hours on December 19th. Senior Allied commanders met in Verdun. The situation was grim. Bastogne was surrounded. American divisions were being pushed back. Weather-grounded Allied air power their greatest advantage. General Dwight D. Eisenhower asked the question that hung in the air. "What can we do?" Patton did not hesitate. He stood, turned toward Eisenhower, and said calmly, "I can attack in 48 hours. The room went silent. Some thought they had misheard him. Attack? From the south? In this weather? Eisenhower stared at Patton. "Who?" he asked. "The Third Army," Patton replied. The German High Command would later learn of this meeting through captured documents and post-war interrogations. When told of Patton's claim, one German general reportedly laughed and said, "Impossible. No army can move that fast in these conditions." But Patton was not talking about what was possible. He was talking about what was necessary. The turn on December 20th, Patton issued orders that would echo through military history. The Third Army would pivot 90 degrees east to north across frozen roads, through snow-choked villages, under constant threat of German attack. Columns began to move before dawn. Trucks slid into ditches. Tanks froze solid overnight. Men marched with blankets wrapped around their rifles to keep the metal from freezing to their hands. Officers lost units in the snow, but they kept moving. Patton drove the roads himself, standing in his open command car, pistol on his hip, cursing the weather, urging men forward. At one point, he ordered chaplains to write a prayer for good weather and made sure it was distributed to every unit. 2 days later, the skies cleared. To the German High Command, it seemed impossible. To Patton, it was inevitable. German confidence turns to confusion on December 22nd. German intelligence reported unusual movement to the south. At first, it was dismissed. American units were always shifting. Defensive redeployments were expected. But then reports multiplied. Armored columns, artillery, Supply convoys moving north. Fast. A German staff officer in the Ardennes sector reportedly said, "It appears the Americans are attacking from the wrong direction." Maps were checked. Then checked again. The realization began to sink in. Patton's Third Army was not retreating. It was coming straight at them. One German general later admitted, "We had calculated American responses based on reason. We did not calculate Patton." The road to Bastogne. Patton's lead units slammed into German positions near Ardennes on December 26. The fighting was brutal. Snow muffled the sound of artillery, making it impossible to tell where death was coming from. German units, stretched thin and exhausted, were caught mid-offensive, forced to defend against an enemy they believed could not possibly be there. American tanks broke through. Infantry followed. At 4:50 p.m., elements of the 4th Armored Division reached Bastogne. The siege was broken. Inside the town, starving, freezing paratroopers of the 101st Airborne emerged from foxholes and cellars to greet them. Some cried, some laughed, some simply collapsed in the snow. The impossible had happened. What the German High Command admitted after the war. German generals were interrogated, their assumptions dissected, their failures examined. Again and again, one decision was mentioned: Patton's turn. Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt reportedly said, "Patton's maneuver was not just rapid, it was irrational by our standards. That is why it succeeded." Another German officer admitted, "We believed weather was an ally. Patton turned it into a weapon." Perhaps the most striking admission came from a senior operations officer who said, "The moment Patton's army appeared from the south, we knew the offensive had failed. No plan survives contact with a man who ignores limits." The German High Command had planned for everything except audacity. The cost of the miracle victory did not come without sacrifice. Thousands of American soldiers died in the snow. Frostbite claimed as many men as enemy fire. Vehicles were abandoned. Supply lines stretched to breaking. But Patton never slowed. He pressed forward, driving German forces back, collapsing their offensive, shattering their last chance in the West. The 90-degree turn became legend not because it was flawless, but because it was fearless. Legacy of a decision today. Military academies still study Patton's maneuver. Not just the logistics. Not just the speed, but the mindset. Patton did what doctrine said he should not. He trusted preparation, instinct, and momentum over caution. And in doing so, he forced the German High Command to admit something they never wanted to say. They had been outthought, outmoved, and outdared. In the frozen forests of the Ardennes, amid snow and steel, Patton proved that wars are not always won by numbers or weather, but by the will to move. When others believe movement is impossible, that was Patton's miracle, and it changed the course of the war. January 1945. The Ardennes. Europeth snow was still red where Patton had broken through. Bastogne was no longer surrounded, but the battle was far from over. German forces did not collapse overnight. They pulled back slowly, bitterly, fighting for every frozen field and shattered village. What had changed was not the fighting. It was the certainty. Inside the German High Command, something fundamental had cracked. For the first time since the offensive began, German officers were no longer asking how to win but how to survive what was coming next. From shock to desperation, reports from the front arrived hourly. American armor advancing faster than expected. Infantry attacking through conditions once believed impassable. Supply lines holding when German analysts had sworn they would snap. One staff officer wrote in his report, "The enemy operates as if immune to winter." That sentence circulated quietly through headquarters. Patton's Third Army did not pause to celebrate Bastogne. There were no parades, no speeches. Tanks refueled. Wounded were evacuated. Orders were rewritten in pencil and blood. Patton pushed north and east simultaneously, an aggressive maneuver that forced German commanders into impossible choices: defend retreat routes or hold ground. They could not do both. Patton's relentless pressure. Patton understood something his enemies did not. The German army was no longer fighting for victory, it was fighting for time. So he denied them both. He attacked where German commanders expected rest. He moved at night. He advanced in storms. When a unit stalled, he sent another round it instead of waiting. Patton's orders were brutally simple: don't hold ground, take it. German commanders later admitted that Patton's speed shattered their ability to reorganize. Defensive lines dissolved before they could fully form. One German colonel would later say, "We were no longer fighting an army. We were fighting momentum." The weather turns again. Early January. Allied air power returned. Clear skies revealed the full scale of Patton's gamble and its success. American aircraft roared overhead, strafing retreating German columns trapped on narrow, icy roads. Fuel trucks burned. Artillery positions vanished in smoke. The same weather the Germans had counted on now worked against them. A Luftwaffe officer reportedly remarked, "Winter delayed the Americans, but only until Patton arrived." Inside German headquarters, the admission of the Ardennes offensive collapsed. German High Command convened emergency meetings. Maps were stripped from walls. Arrows pointing west were erased and redrawn east. One question dominated every room. How did Patton move so fast? Post-war interrogations would reveal the truth. German planners had assumed American armies operated strictly by doctrine. They believed supply limitations would dictate movement. They believed commanders would wait for perfect conditions. Patton had violated every assumption. A senior German operations officer later admitted, "We planned against American caution. Patton brought American audacity." Another added, "If any one commander broke the logic of our offensive, it was Patton." These were not compliments, they were confessions. The human coast behind the legend was suffering. Patton's soldiers paid dearly for the miracle. Men slept in snow-filled foxholes. Boots froze solid overnight. Medics worked with numb fingers. Frostbite took toes, fingers, sometimes entire limbs. Patton knew this, but he also knew what delay would cost. Every mile gained shortened the war. Every day saved spared lives elsewhere. To his troops, Patton said only this: "You're going to be proud of this for the rest of your lives." Many would be. Many would not live long enough to remember it. The collapse of the German Plan B mid-January. The Ardennes offensive was finished. German forces had lost irreplaceable armor, fuel, and experienced troops. Their last major gamble in the West had failed, not slowly, but violently, and at the center of that failure stood one decision: Patton's 90-degree turn. German High Command documents, captured later, revealed that the offensive timetable assumed Patton would be operationally irrelevant for weeks. He had become decisive in days. One captured report concluded, "The enemy's Southern Army responded with a speed that invalidated our entire operational design." That sentence was as close to an apology as history would ever get. Patton pushes east. Patton did not stop at Bastogne. By February, his Third Army was racing toward the Rhine, smashing through weakened German defenses. Cities fell, bridges were seized, prisoners surrendered by the thousands. The psychological effect was as powerful as the physical one. German soldiers knew Patton's name, they knew his reputation. Some surrendered at the sound of approaching armor. One German POW reportedly said, "If Patton is here, the war is over for us." The final judgment after Germany's surrender. Surviving commanders reflected on their failures again and again. Patton's maneuver surfaced, not as a tactical mistake, not as a lucky break, but as a turning point. A German general summarized it best: "The miracle was not the turn itself, it was that he dared it and that it worked." Patton had forced the German High Command to confront a truth they could no longer deny. They were not defeated by numbers alone. They were defeated by speed, will, and refusal to accept limits. Epilogue. The meaning of the miracle. History would remember Patton as controversial, brilliant, reckless. But in the frozen winter of 1944, one thing became undeniable. When others saw impossible terrain, Patton saw a road. When others waited for conditions, Patton created them. When the German High Command calculated safety, Patton chose motion, and that choice made in snow under fire helped end the war in Europe.